Welcome to Marvel Vision, a podcast about Marvel, the MCU, and right now, Avengers Age of Ultron. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
And we are going all the way back to 2015 to talk about the second Avengers movie. And to talk about it, we have a special guest, Jamie Jirak. She is a staff writer for comicbook.com and a host for the Phase Zero podcast. Jamie, welcome. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hello.
Oh my gosh. I'm very excited to talk because, and I don't say this dismissively because I think I'm one too, you are the rare breed of a true fan of Age of Ultron. So I'd love to just start off and just to give a spoiler warning here. I'm sure everybody who's listening has probably seen it several times, probably after every episode of WandaVision. You flipped right into it and got right into watching Age of Ultron in full. But if you didn't, go watch the movie, come back, we're going to go full spoilers. But Jamie, to start off, tell me about your first experience watching Age of Ultron.
Wow. So now today is actually 4 years that I've been working at comicbook.com. And so the last 4 years, my life of like knowing what's coming in a Marvel movie is very different than it was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I did not know who was going to be in the movie. I didn't know a lot. And I will tell you that I did not know Elizabeth Olsen was playing Wanda. And I grew up the biggest Mary-Kate and Ashley fan. I was a part of the official Mary-Kate and Ashley fan club.
Wow. Those are her less famous sisters, right?
Yeah. And I didn't even recognize her throughout this movie. But I will tell you what happened. I realized I was bisexual. And that's not a joke. Age of Ultron.
From this movie?
Yes.
Wow.
Hey, awesome.
In Age of Ultron made me realize I was queer. And like at 20, I was 25, and like looking back on my life, how did it take 25 years for me to figure that out? But it was literally this movie. So this movie is very special for me just for that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Elizabeth Olsen is my favorite actor. I've seen every movie she's ever made. I love her deeply now. But that aside, my sexual awakening aside, thanks to her in this movie, it is my favorite Avengers movie of all four Avengers movie. I know that is not a popular opinion. I love James Spader, and his Ultron is my favorite villain aside from Wanda in Doctor Strange, because that's Wanda. He's scary, he's funny, he's everything you want in a villain. Jimmy Spades is what every time he comes on screen, that's what I shout. I'm not anti Bruce Nat. I like their arc. I like everything that people don't like about this movie. I enjoy. I like the action. I just everything about it. It just makes me so happy. It's like my comfort movie of the MCU. I would rank it third in all of the MCU for myself, but it is probably the movie I've watched the most.
Well, I gotta know. Wait, now I gotta know what's above it, because it seems like this is the top. How is it third?
Number one is WandaVision.
Yeah, I was gonna say any other Wanda related.
Okay. So it goes WandaVision, and then.
And two is the basic Winter Soldier. I mean, Captain America Winter Soldier is just a flawless movie.
Wow.
You can't, I mean, I watch Ultron more, but it's not better than that movie. I'm not
I love that so much. I love that story. That's amazing. I'd love to hear from you guys also. I imagine you had exactly the same experience as Jamie watching.
Yep. I took the words right out of my mouth. Well, you know what? In rewatch, I know this movie everyone makes fun of this movie. In the whole run of these movies, and rewatching it, I was like, you know what? There's a lot to really like about it. I think the parts that just feel like that everyone glommed onto for not liking are the complexity of trying to connect the Mind Stone to Ultron and make that one story, because that stuff is like sort of chatty and a little bit working at cross purposes to the rest of the very easy breezy chill movie. That this is like the best hangout Avengers movie. I think it feels the most like a comic book from the opening sequence to the dinner party. It feels like you're just opening up a comic book and reading a randomly numbered, it's not a number one, it's not a like huge crossover Infinity Gauntlet, it's like Avengers 124 or something like that. And so like I really enjoyed the rewatch.
Wow.
And just to mention, sorry, and then I'll kick it over to you, Pete. I think this is the only Avengers movie where they do hang out, right? Like, you have the first Avengers movie is them getting together and figuring out how to be a team. The second Avengers movie, they're actually a team. And then they're broken apart by Civil War. Then you get into Infinity War and Endgame, and it's all about like them in different configurations figuring out how to get back together to this end point where you have Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man finally together fighting Thanos. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're right on the money with that. It's the only one that actually does feel like that comic book. Pete, what about you?
Well, I gotta say, like, after all we know has happened, it's such a nice feeling to kind of go back here, before Wanda kind of goes off a little bit, and there's a lot of things that happen, so it's kind of a magical sweet spot for them as a team. So it's kind of nice to go back to. But for me, I kind of have the opposite reactions to old Spader. Like, he plays the creepiest person that every time I see him, I'm like, this guy's a fucking creep. Like, how is he getting work?
That's what
He's
you want.
So creepy. Like, who gives him jobs? Like, leave this creep alone. Like,
Wait, now you're attacking James Spader, the man?
well, that's the thing. He's so good at being creepy. I can't deal with him in things. Like, I'm just like, oh, like, get this guy away.
Wow.
So he's hard for me to watch. In
You don't even see
action.
it. He is not that. Ultron is CGI. So you should know that.
No, dude, this guy, James Spader did all like the movements. Like, he went all in for this, dude. This wasn't just a voice, although they did, like, his voice is so creepy. They let him just do his. They were like, no, don't put anything on it. Just talk.
You act like
it's,
James Spader.
it's
then
funny
they put
how
the
you got
creep
like
on it.
one fact very right, surprisingly, and then one fact terribly wrong.
No,
Just
no,
for anybody,
I'm right on both facts.
no, you're not. So, just to mention for anybody who's listening to the podcast real quick, he did actually do the motion capture on set. They did the whole like red eyeballs hanging above his head on like little doingly things. So he did do that, but the voice did have a mechanical tint that was
Well,
added.
that's what I'm saying. But he used his natural voice, and then they put the tin on it.
That's
Why are you? Who are you mad at?
yeah.
This
It's
scenario?
like
I
that baseball
read the
player was
fact
great,
just like-
and then
just-
also he used steroids.
Oh my god.
I feel like Pete saying this baseball player is great, but I can't believe he used a bat. Why did he just use his arms to hit the ball?
Yeah. James
just
Spader
saying
is great as a villain.
so
I think he's
creepy, he's
awesome as
just gotta-
Ultron. I do want to mention before we get too far, probably the elephant in the room. I'm sure people know this, but it is written, directed by Joss Whedon, whose reputation has not grown, I would say, over the time since Age of Ultron. And
That's,
if anything, it feels a little bit like this movie was kind of a turning point because there was all this reported behind the scenes friction with Marvel. He talked a lot about how impossible this movie was to make, how difficult it was, how it really wrung him out. And then there were a lot of harassment accusations and other things that came out over time, over the past couple of years. So I will say, as somebody who used to be a fan of Whedon, that aspect of it does make it hard to watch, particularly with certain. There's a lot of quipping going on. There's like a lot of classic Whedon quipping. So that sort of thing does make it a little bit difficult. Jamie, you look like you want to say something there.
Yeah, my favorite top number two shows of all time are Buffy and Angel. There's nothing I love more than those shows, and so I really grew up a huge Whedon fan, and maybe that's why like this movie, I still, it's easy for me. I'm like, it's separation now. If I'm not going to watch anything he ever makes again, because it's like ruined. But if he's already made it and I loved it before we learned he was an asshole, then I'm still gonna love it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's in a little bubble of.
Well, no,
okay.
I mean, I think that's something that gets talked about a lot in terms of separation in the art and the artist. And I firmly believe that's a very personal thing that you need to decide for yourself. So I do think it was an interesting thing rewatching it this time, having that reaction to some of the quips and some of the dialogue that feels like, I don't know if the character would necessarily say that, but certainly Joss Whedon would write that sort of thing, even if it's a funny joke. But the part where I do think, not to give him too many big ups, but clearly he's much more interested and I do think excels a lot. The two best characters in the movie to me are Ultron and Vision, who are these very two extremes of the stuff that Whedon likes to write, which is the very quippy, over maniacal villain who's very aware and one or two steps ahead of everybody, which is Ultron, and then the other, this philosophical musing about our place in life, which characterizes Vision. And both of those things in the movie work very, very well, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the sort of Firefly Serenity spectrum of liking Joss Whedon, and you hear lines that sort of sound like those lines from those projects. Like just watching it, rewatching it now, you can just hear them. And so, like, that took me one step out of the movie, and then took me one step closer to Joss Whedon. And I was like, let's not get into all that stuff. But I agree with you. Like, this movie does the dance of taking so much complexity, and it shows it shows the scaffolding a little bit in the middle, in a couple of the middles of this longer movie, but it does hang together. And when the characters are being quippy, it sort of works for almost all of them, I think.
I feel like one thing that I like, Taika always gets all the credit for making Thor funny, but Thor has some goofy moments in this movie that I think that people forget. Like when he says the line about Hulk victims and a couple of other things like at the party. And I think that people think that like Thor was completely changed in Ragnarok, and he wasn't. He always had his little moments. He's just, now that's his whole thing.
I agree completely. I think this movie had the big step out of him being so self-serious. Like, I feel like they turned it on him a little bit the moment when Cap's reaching to pick up Mjolnir, and you see him be like, whoa. It was great. And, like, that's exactly what I feel like Taika seized on and just made the whole thing.
Well, I think, not to get too far afield with this, but part of that at least was Chris Hemsworth realizing he was allowed to be a funny guy, because he is a very funny guy, very frustratingly. He can, you can't be both handsome and funny. Choose a lane,
Perfect
dude.
man.
I'm just saying. But he is funny, and I think this was part of this evolution, like we're saying. He also has, in my mind, one of the... I think you were touching on this earlier, Justin, but one of the like wonkier parts of the movie in terms of shoving in the Infinity Stones thing, to the point that I think you can watch this on Disney Plus. There's a deleted scene where he gets taken over by the Norn Queen, I think it is, and is talking about the destruction of the world and the Infinity Stones. And it was so weird and so off everything else that was going on. They cut it out and just made that one still kind of weird scene of him hanging out in a pool with Stellan Skarsgård. But they gotta do that, right? Like they're continuing the story of the MCU. They're laying the groundwork for everything that's going to come before. So they don't want people to watch it and be like, you forgot about that Infinity Stones thing. That doesn't have anything to do with it, I think.
Yeah, and like this is we forget now, but this is where it really was first fully told that this is it. This is what we're doing, and we're doing it soon. And the ghost of my younger self was like, you really liked this moment, because looking at it now, it's like this whole scene in the pool seems like such a superfluous, unnecessary side trip, but it actually was just an epic fan service moment that laid the groundwork going forward, and something that Marvel doesn't really do anymore.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about...
I'm just like, Stellan's here, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
Yay! I get to see him.
There was actually, I mean, just to mention while we're talking about it, there were a couple of people that could have been in the movie, but weren't. One of them, they actually shot stuff with Tom Hiddleston as Loki. I don't know if they've ever confirmed exactly where it was, but I believe it was probably in the dream sequence where Thor is taken over by the Scarlet Witch. But apparently test audiences saw it and thought, oh, Loki is behind the curtain. He's the one that's really controlling Ultron. And it was so distracting to people. Ultimately, they took it out because it didn't make sense. Also, I think people probably know this, but there were times when they were talking about maybe having Captain Marvel in the movie. They ended up not using her because they didn't want to just throw her in there without, casting her or having a backstory or anything. So they actually used the plates that they had developed for Captain Marvel floating in at the end of the movie and replaced her with Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch in that Avengers moment at the end. And Spider-Man was the other one that just didn't work out. The deal didn't work out in time.
Better.
Yeah, absolutely. It all worked out in the end. It's all fine. But I want to talk about some of the specific characters. We touched on this a little bit already, but why don't we start with Ultron? We presented some opinions on it, but what do you think about Ultron as a villain and how he plays out over the course of the movie? Jamie, what about from you?
I mean, I've made it clear I'm a fan. I mean, one of my favorite moments is when he rips off Andy Serkis's arm, and his reaction to that. It's just I love that he's a creation of Tony's. I love that, like, this is their fault, and we don't, and of course the consequences to that were quite major. But I like that there's no villain but Tony in this, and the result is why he's just so icky. Ultron. There's so many things about him, and every all the beats, and I love the way that he gets Wanda and Pietro in there, and then they realize, like, uh-oh, we backed the wrong horse.
This guy's trouble.
This guy. Yeah.
I think he, like, great villain. The way that they make Ultron so human, like the moment that you were just talking about, Jamie, where he, like, has a little tantrum sort of, and then it makes him bad at being a villain for a while, and by the end when he's just like flying the Quinjet shooting at stuff, it's like this guy had a plan. He's just like totally off plot, just like shooting at buildings and stuff by the end of the movie. And I would have never expected that from an Ultron villain movie. I would expect to be like this cold, calculated thing. So that was just a great surprise and a great turn.
Pete,
did you have an opinion?
Yeah, did you have an opinion on that? Did you?
Well,
did you
I mean,
it?
You know, the thing is about this is, you know, and I don't want to keep coming back to this, but they liked James Spader's take on him so much, like the fact that he was saying because he's so young. He's like a teenager who's just like so young, but kind of so cocky about things. And that's where his like downfall was. He was just kind of young to it all and making new guy mistakes. And so it was like this interesting take that they kind of like, what seems to me is like they brought in Spader and he's so creepy that they just loved every bit of him and were just using everything for the film. And it was kind of like every choice that he made, they were like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that, which just affirms my kind of like, this guy's playing this too good.
Your mission statement. Pete, did you like the part when he was like, I've got no strings to hold
stop,
me
dude,
down? Did you like that part when he did that?
That no strings monologue gets me every effing time.
I've got no strings on me. It's not a monologue, it's a little song. It's like a Broadway musical now.
Oh, Pete's right, actually. The monologue that he does when Ultron first shows up in the broken robot body, dripping oil, and threatens the Avengers at the party.
No strings on me, yeah. And then, like, all the, you know, it echoes it out, no strings, and they all turn on, and it's just, like, the creepiest fucking thing ever.
How do you feel about Pinocchio, real quick?
Oh, great call.
Awful.
You hate Pinocchio? He's a cute little, he's a boy.
The character, or like the movie specifically? Is anything involved? Like, if the name Pinocchio's there, you're out.
Yeah, it just makes me really weirded out, the whole Pinocchio thing.
Do you like? What about puppets? What about puppets in general?
Yeah, do you like puppets?
No, I don't.
The original robots, Pete says, puppets. So scary. The AI, the original AI.
I know I already said this, but I love Ultron in the movie. I think he's fantastic. I'm the total opposite of Pete. I think James Spader's delivery on everything is so great. He really does actually make a lot of these lines work, even things like, I'm forgetting the exact line, but where he talks about, what are those little humans called? Children.
Yeah.
It's great when he does that.
It slipped my mind.
Pretty good.
It's because he doesn't care.
It's literally
he doesn't
the only
care enough.
I could do.
Oh, it's so creepy.
Yeah,
do you feel strange that Alex can crush a Spader impression, Pete? Does that line stuff up for you, maybe?
I go to Blacklist conventions all the time.
I bet you do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fun.
No, not that fun. The other thing that I'll mention about him, and this kicks it maybe over to Vision a little bit, the next character that I think we should talk about, that scene at the end of the movie in the woods where they face off is one of my favorite scenes in the MCU.
Yeah.
Just having that as a quiet after this enormous action scene at Sokovia, having them just talk about the future of humanity, and Vision giving this mission statement of, yes, they're doomed, but they're going to try anyway. Like, that's literally like the mission statement of the movie. That's what the Avengers are doing here as Sokovia is rising out of the ground, and ending with that little joke of him saying, well, of course, I was born yesterday, with Paul Bettany's little smile at the end. It's great.
Well, that's what I want. I mean, Paul Bettany as Vision is such an amazing, and like, from the first, you know, well, not the first one, the second one where Paul took over for the Iron Man kind of robot voice, like, the thought was, oh my God, I wonder if if he's gonna turn into it. And the fact that we got to see Vision and it happened the first time for me, the geek in me was like, oh, I called it. Oh, this is amazing. It's Vision.
Do you think, this is a question, do you think they cast a handsome man as the voice of Jarvis knowing that it would be Vision, or it was just lucky break?
Lucky.
No, I think
Absolutely.
I think they were smart enough to be like, in case this grows into this very popular character, like, why not have it be Paul?
Only
I don't think
cast
they had
handsome
any
voices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie, what do you think about Vision?
I think about this constantly. I think that in any franchise ever made, I don't think there's ever been a more insane journey that an actor has had than Paul Bettany. I think that it was like, Paul Bettany is famous. He's got this good voice. Let's make him Jarvis. Great. It was 2008. We don't know what's going to happen. And then jump to 2015. He's Vision. I genuinely don't think they knew that was coming, at least not in 2008. And then to jump to WandaVision and you're doing goofy sitcom Dick Van Dyke magic weirdo shit, and like it's just insane. And now he's gonna get his own show, and like I'm just so happy for him. I think he deserves all the goodness that's coming to him, but I don't think it was planned at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's great. I also find it interesting, Pete, that you hate Ultron and are terrified of him. Vision, you're like, love, no notes.
Love.
Also,
no
right.
notes. None.
But almost the same, basically the perfect other side of the coin.
Yeah, exactly. It's like giving something that scares me, keeps me, but also something that comforts me so much. You know?
It's very funny to make love heads but be terrified of tails.
Exactly.
Like flipping
yeah.
a coin.
Yeah.
I'll also say, I think the way that they do this whole Vision Ultron story points to one of the strengths of the MCU that we've talked about a lot on the podcast, but just the idea that they don't feel beholden to the comics, but instead to the spirit of the comics. And the idea that they didn't feel like, oh, we got to bring in Hank Pym here, even though he's going to be an Ant-Man and make that work. We're, going to work in like, go hardcore on the Scarlet Witch Vision romance. Instead, they just have little notes of it there as they're kind of looking at each other. He comes out of the casket or whatever you call it, and she's just
The
like
cradle.
Alex.
Sorry.
Comes
The
out
casket?
of the cradle.
What kind of scientist makes
coffin.
their great creation in
my
a
God.
casket?
It's a vampire.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's vampire talk.
Yeah, just they have those little notes, but like Jamie was saying, letting it come from the characters we already know, Bruce Banner and Tony Stark, makes so much more sense and works so much better. And having that line of succession still there, which we know and love from the comics, but coming up with a new riff on it, I thought was great. It's good stuff. Why don't we jump to one of the more controversial aspects, which, JB, I know you said you love, but curious to hear you talk about it anyway. The Bruce-Nat relationship, the romantic relationship.
Oh, man.
You're very mixed on it. You seem to like it, though.
Yeah, I think I want to get this out of the way because I think a lot of people misunderstand something she says in that bedroom scene where they're at the Bartons. She says something like she's talking about like how the graduation ceremony, if she can't have kids and all this, and then
Right.
she's like, now who's the monster or whatever. And people think that Whedon wrote that to say like she's a monster because she can't have children, and he didn't write that scene well. It is confusing. The first time it does kind of make it seem like that's what she's saying. It's not what she's saying. She's saying like she was trained to kill so much and that has been her identity so much and that's why she's a monster. But I get why people like think that's the opposite and that's why they despise that scene. But I think if you're really paying attention, that's not what she's saying. Aside from that, I like their dynamic. I didn't see it coming. I like knowing that Hulk is like kind of like Black Widow's one of her biggest fears, and then she turns it around and it's romantic. I really love their flirting scene at the party.
The bar, the part where she's behind the bar and he walks up to her. I mean, it's a little creepy
sexy.
that Cap's there and he's like, "Hey, I know from up close."
It's a grandpa moment. He's like, well, you
He's
can't.
like, "Hey, But other than that, I love the back and forth. You know what I mean? Where she's opening up to him and being vulnerable, and he's like freaking out about it. He's like, "Oh, but what would he do? What would he do wrong?" You know? And she's
It's
like,
so
"Nothing."
Bruce.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And I know people hate the "I adore you" line when she kisses him, but like I don't know. And the MCU is so bad at romance. I talk about this all the time. They have terrible follow through. So few couples get their own end game. It's like in She-Hulk, Matt and Jen is like the greatest thing I've ever seen. But I'm like, I have no faith that's gonna go anywhere in the future because it's like, and even like the sex scene in Eternals is the most sexless thing I've ever seen in my life. Like this whole franchise is just
horrible.
bad at this. So like I'll take what I can get, and ScarJo and Mark have good chemistry, and so give it to me into my veins because it's hot. They're both hot.
Well, like I agree with you. This is by far the most actual sexual energy in any MCU project. Maybe She-Hulk and Matt come close, but theirs was played for comedy. This felt like they actually did romance and intimacy. More importantly, the shots where she like is doing her shutdown on the Hulk.
Yeah.
Well, just her fingers touching his giant wrist. There are intimate moments like that in any of these movies, and I just thought it makes the movie feel so much more mature, and not in like a sexual way per se, but just like, oh yes, I understand this, and this is something that I can connect with. That's not just like cold, like I like you, with characters walking in and out of different scenes. It felt real. I like it. It's a bummer we're never going to get to see more of this specific relationship.
Yeah. I fall a little more on the negative, it sounds like, than the rest of you, but I do think at the same time
You hate love.
I don't love love. I wish it would just stop too much.
Oh, wow.
But watching it this time, I actually felt like with enough distance, I understand logically how they got there, even if it emotionally doesn't quite work for me. Just the idea of taking
Doesn't work for you.
Are you saying absence made your heart grow fonder, literally?
Yeah, I think so, actually.
Wow.
Just in the first movie, drawing that line of connection, I understand how when you're sitting down and crafting this, thinking, hey, they had that connection there back in the shack or whatever it was where she first recruited Hulk. Let's follow that through. Let's see where that goes. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate that. Hold on. I appreciate that on the same level as the Barton farm thing, which I think is another controversial thing. But that is something that I feel like they took a risk there. They took a chance in terms of doing something that you wouldn't necessarily expect with Hawkeye, giving him a whole family, giving him this family life, taking the Avengers and sticking them on a farm for a solid chunk of the movie. I understand it doesn't work for everybody, and it doesn't totally work for me all the time, but I appreciate the bravery of changing up the pace of the movie at the same time.
All right, dude. The fact that somebody has the power to stop a Hulk in his tracks and trim him back down to human size. You don't think there's something more than maybe friendship there? The fact that there has to be some kind of connection to fact that Banner, in no matter what form, responds to her. You're not, none of that. You're like, no, I don't believe in love.
That was a good impersonation of me. You should take that to the Blacklist convention.
So,
do you have a trigger,
are you saying,
by the way, Pete? Just to check. This is just asking for no reason.
Please tell us. I'd love to learn it.
Give you a little Pommy Rubby.
Alex, are you saying the Vision Scarlet Witch, even the little nuggets of it we get in this movie, was a more successful romance for you?
Yes.
Interesting. It's such a
maybe it's because that's what I'm used to from the comics. It's entirely possible that's what it is because I can intuit him coming out of the, what do we call it? Casket, I think is what we decided on.
Let me ask you this. What do you call your bed you get into at night?
Yeah, what do you call your traveling coffin that you sleep in?
My casket. Yeah, absolutely. That moment I liked a lot. Him rescuing her from the ruins of Sokovia, I liked a lot. That is completely predicated on decades of comic book knowledge. I'm well aware of that and I understand it. But yeah, it worked better for me. But to each his own. That is the joy of love.
Because to me, I feel like there's no actual connection or chemistry or anything, I think, between Vision and Scarlet Witch. And please fight me, Jamie, fight me if you disagree.
I do disagree.
I feel like there's some stares, but otherwise it literally is just him flying in and grabbing her and pulling her out. So like I see so much more in the other relationship.
I mean, in this movie specifically, it's harder now because we've seen so much since. Like last night it was 1:30 a.m. I finished Ultron and I'm like, I could put on Civil War.
Yes.
And like, you know, we have that paprika scene, like all their cute stuff, and I think that informs going back to Ultron, and I think specifically when he's not awake yet from his coffin, that she like feels him and senses him dreaming. And I think just those little things, and it's kind of like what I love slow burn ships in TV, because when you go back and rewatch it, you see the sprinkles.
Right.
And I like that. But on a first watch, maybe not. Maybe we're not noticing it. But now I've seen it 55 times, and I'm like, yeah,
Right.
they're blossoming.
There it
They're gonna
is.
have twins one day.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, that could probably kick us over into talking about Scarlet Witch and Pietro, which was a huge deal for a number of reasons. And it's hard to think about this now because at least Scarlet Witch has been so entrenched in the MCU through multiple movies. But this was a big deal because Fox and Disney were two separate things. They had to figure out how could we work this because traditionally Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are mutants. And ultimately they came up with this deal where we had two Pietros at the same time with Evan Peters and also with Aaron Taylor Johnson in this movie. And part of the deal was, at least here, they couldn't mention mutants. They couldn't mention Magneto in any way, any of that stuff. They just need to give them a full own origin. And I feel like as a net positive, that worked out very much in their favor.
Yeah. Wait, you mean that this Quicksilver died?
Well,
here?
specifically, I'm saying, like, forget about Quicksilver for a second, but just the idea of being forced to create this new origin and tie it to Sokovia, that has paid huge dividends throughout the MCU at this point.
That's fair. I mean, Sokovia, who knew Sokovia would be a word that we say so many times in our lives?
Well, Justin, what do you think about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in this movie?
I like, they felt fake evil in the beginning. I was like, wow, they're so, like, why are they suddenly on this robot side? And then they did the turn so effectively. Her hearing his thoughts and being legitimately scared and being like, yeah, we can't be with this. Like, I thought from that point on, I was like, nailed it. And then when Captain America sort of teaches them to be heroes in that moment on Sokovia, and I thought that was great. And then you see the connection between Scarlet Witch and Captain America pay forward in the next, especially Civil
Hawkeye.
War. She's like
Hawkeye, right?
Hawkeye too, but I mean Captain America. Like in the beginning of Civil War, when she's learning espionage, you can tell Cap is like sort of being like, okay, here's what you're gonna do, and she's like, okay, I want to do a good job, because it feels like there's that sort of mentor relationship.
Right.
And I know Hawkeye and her and Quicksilver had a whole thing as well, but he was much more the like big brother being like, what are you doing? I could shoot you right now. No one would know.
No.
Sort of like, what are you talking about, dude?
That was a fun moment.
Yeah.
And then he named his baby after him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so do you... I'll also, it sounds like maybe I'm in the minority here that I think Quicksilver is ridiculous in this movie. The whole bet you didn't see that coming bit just doesn't work for me necessarily. And
Wes' last words, I agree. It felt a little like, yo, you want to go out on a little punchline? A callback? And granted, I want to die delivering a killer callback.
How are you going to go out, bro?
Yeah, maybe I'll say the same line from Quicksilver, and people are like, what? I'll be like, Quicksilver from the end of Age of Ultron, which hasn't aged well, but neither have, and then I'll die.
Yeah, neither have I.
Nothing like explaining a bit as you go.
Yeah.
People
Jamie,
are going to get
like
the ref.
Quicksilver as well?
So it's funny because I remember when they announced it was gonna happen. That I do remember, and I remember thinking like, Evan Peters is so good. And it was weird, like a weird choice. But in a way, I love him because he's just serves as a prop for Wanda's character development. And we need that. She's my girl, and especially over time how important that relationship has become. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson's good. I'm glad he's dead. I think it's so funny that literally half the Avengers movies psych you out, making you think Hawkeye's gonna die, and then he doesn't.
Yes,
like it happens in 2 of the 4 movies. But when I go back, I really like all that arc, and I like their arc together. I like everything he serves in this movie, but like I never needed to see him again. I think that he served his purpose, and he helped progress Wanda. He helped progress Clint, and great, now he's dead.
Yeah. Pete, what about you?
Well, I mean, he was a big part of Olsen signing on because they had done a movie together and they were kind of like a package deal.
Somebody read some facts before he got on for the podcast.
Yeah. So anyway, so the point, the fact that like we got them. I thought it did serve a good point of like, these movies, you got to have, somebody's got to die at some point for the stakes because they are so high. So yeah, I thought it was good for that. Like, he was good, but not too good where you'd be upset that he's dead. And it was tough because the X-Men movies I didn't like very much, but the Quicksilver part was my favorite. I mean, they had like a cool song, guys having a blast. It was a fun time. So it was like this Quicksilver was a little bit more hardcore. And as far as fake evil, I really bought his evil in the beginning because when they're saying that, like, we waited 2 days to die and we're just staring at a Stark canister, I was like, yeah, I would want to kill that guy. Yeah, that would really mess with me in a huge way. So I really thought that the original team up part made a lot of sense, and I felt like it would harden you enough to kind of be this cold about that kind of stuff. So I don't know, but yeah, I felt like the guy did a good job, and if someone had to go, I was glad it was him.
Well, why don't we talk about some of the bigger scenes, the things that jumped out to us? One action sequence that I love every time I see this movie is the Hulkbuster fight. That Tony Stark versus the Hulk as they're going wild is great. The way that's paced out, how big it is. I love the joke at the beginning, the Archie Comics joke of Veronica being the thing that he's using to shut down the Hulk, or at least trying to shut down the Hulk, because Hulk loves Betty so much. But it plays out so well, and it's so big and so much fun.
I mean, I agree that fight is great. I mean, if we want to talk about sort of, I think all the fights in this movie are just really well done. The opening sequence,
come on, dude,
so good. It's one of the most comic booky things that's been put to screen, and that's a compliment maybe we like to give out. But this one is the one that first felt like they understood the flow. It felt like you were reading it, because it felt like the pages were turning as the characters shifted between, and then the slow-mo, and they're all like the cover of the movie, basically.
They're all lined up. Like, it was so cool.
So excited. It just juiced up. As an audience member, it juices you so hard. And then it gets to be, then we dip into a sort of a little bit of like, a lot of like, wait, what's this place? What's happening here? But the very beginning, just like such a win.
Yeah, I agree. I'm so glad you brought that up. But yeah, and then the fact that you kind of like get to see the Hulkbuster moment is also such a huge, just nerdy, glorious thing to be able to witness on the big screen. Yeah, I mean, are we talking about favorite moments? Should I bring up the Marvel flip and the fact that it was all comic book and it was a really
no? I don't think you should bring that up.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you should mention that.
All right,
just wanted to. I
didn't know if we were talking
about. That would be crazy
about...
for you to say that, since you've said it on every single one of these.
We're like 40 minutes into the podcast. Don't talk about the beginning of the movie at this point.
Okay, well, I just thought it was cool. It was a great way to start the movie. You talking about being juiced, and things that juiced me up. Oh man, that Marvel flip, comic books. Come on.
Jamie, what is your favorite action sequence of the movie?
Action sequence? I mean, probably when Wanda walks out and decides she's an Avenger and takes down some robots. I mean, call me biased, but that's it. My favorite moment of the movie, though, is the party, because I like fun. But yeah, Wanda. But the Hulkbuster scene. Talking about that, one thing that always bothers me about that scene, it's awesome, is that Wanda is so torn about Lagos for like the rest of the MCU. After it happens in Civil War, it becomes a big theme in WandaVision. But that was an accident. She did Hulk on purpose, and I'm sure people had to have died in that situation. I cannot imagine that a single person did that somebody had to die, but she never seemed to like feel bad about it, and that was way worse, I think, than what she did in Civil War, but just never came up again. So
I thought that as well, and like this way the movie goes so far out of its way to be like, look, Iron Man caught that elevator with those two random dudes in it, and it's like a whole building went down in the center of the city.
It was an abandoned building, and it very much went directly where the building was and didn't affect anything else.
Yeah, I don't know. Lucky. They're just lucky.
Very lucky.
Also, I want to say that of the million times I've seen this movie, I've never put the Betty and Veronica thing together, and you just like blew my mind a little bit.
That's what I'm here
Wow,
for.
I never
Wow.
once thought of that, and I like
I
it.
love that.
That's good.
There was one other thing that I wanted to throw out at you all that occurred to me while I was watching it this time, and Jamie's not going to like this, but at the beginning of the movie, they go through the whole action sequence at Strucker's. Tony Stark gets to the scepter and he's looking at it. And then Scarlet Witch does the little mind thing where he has the very classic comic book thing. Everybody laid out on an asteroid, Captain America's shield broken. We get that great comic book moment. Is this all kind of Scarlet Witch's fault in this movie? I feel like there's an argument to be made that she gives this vision to Tony Stark, which makes him very upset and nervous and drives him to a place where he fast paces this Ultron program with Bruce Banner, which sets the events in motion. The counterpoint that I'll throw out there, maybe it would have happened anyway. But
that's what I think. I like, yeah, that argument can be made. I won't like, yeah, she made a mistake and it led to some bad things happening. But like Tony was on the brink. Like at this point, we had seen what was going on in Iron Man 3. He is a shaky man. I think that no matter what was going to spook him, something was, and this was all going to come down.
I think it's also part of Ultron's one of his monologues where he says like, people of peace create war. You know, like people are set on paths, and they're kind of like they're going to do what they're going to do, and it is his worst fear. That's something that kind of drives him anyway. It was just kind of turned up. But it's a valid point to kind of point out, though.
Thanks, Pete.
Wow, nice. That's what I call a Pete compliment. It is interesting watching watching Tony sort of unspool, and that feels like that is sort of the central spine of phase 2, 3 of the Marvel of the MCU.
But
one dude just having anxiety take over and ending up really changing the world, and I guess saving the day in the end.
I
guess go to therapy is the lesson.
Like it. Yeah, that's a huge thing. Hey, go to therapy. But I do like it as far as like, because of Tony's kind of unwinding, when he does get a family and then, you know, is made with this choice of like giving it up to go back and try to change things, the fact that he's so protective of it does make sense with his arc. I mean, his arc is really impressive, the ups and downs and all the cookie crumbs along the way. So I really like what they did with him for that.
Another character that I really like that gets some minor moments in the movie, or at least is minorly included in the movie, but still does great, is Nick Fury, who shows up at the farm and then towards the end with the helicarrier. Great moments there. Very fun use of them. I like that quite a bit.
I also want to give a shout out the Don Cheadle moment at the party where it's like, you looking for this? Boom. Was this hysterical, the whole setup of like he does in front of Thor and Thor's not impressed at all. And then it's a very fun little bit.
They give him an extra long time to nail that joke at the end. He like has one reaction, and a second reaction, and then a third reaction. And I was like, okay, we got minutes to spare.
I have a question for you guys about, are any of you Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans?
No,
I've watched most of it.
Yeah,
right. That's my third favorite show of all time.
I don't partake. Wow.
But they set up the helicarrier stuff that he gets it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like that was when they were really trying to push those two things together. And because I'm a big Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan, that's another thing I really love, is that this movie gets to connect with that. Also, I think that the scene where Laura comes out and tells Tony like, oh, can you fix the tractor or whatever, I think that is the number one clue. We should have known all along that she was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. because, as they revealed in the end of Hawkeye, because like, why would Nick Fury go up to her and be like, can you go lie to Tony for me, if they didn't have a pre-existing relationship?
That's fair. And
oh, go ahead.
He also gets called where Tony called, oh, she's an agent. I thought that was a funny thing that I obviously on the rewatch is interesting. I thought it was strange. Like, why does Nick Fury need to talk to Tony by himself? It's a short like hi, and then they're inside all hanging out in the house. So I was like, what do they have a little private Hang sesh with the
maybe
tractor.
there were some
Gotta scold
deleted
him a
scenes.
little.
Yeah, exactly. And it is his fault, as we just established. But, you know, there's a bunch of deleted scenes, a bunch of different things that went in different directions. Apparently, there was a lot of futzing with the farm sequences in particular, where they went back and reshot stuff, I believe. So that might have been something that was left over.
It also was very funny rewatching to hear them be like, "Whoa, Hawkeye has a house." It's like the people we work with were not like, "Whoa, you live in an apart? Fuck, it's crazy, dude. You have relationships with other people."
I mean, Justin,
No.
if you had, you live in Brooklyn, so if you had like a separate farmhouse, I might be like, whoa, that's crazy. Like if you lived upstate somewhere, you know what I mean, on a lake or something, I would be like, that's fucking crazy. Like, how does that work? You know what I mean?
I'll let you know next time I Airbnb something and blow your fucking mind.
Any other notes from the movie that anybody wants to call out?
Well,
in particular? Yes.
I just
Pete, go
want
ahead.
while we're talking a little bit about Agents of Shield, like the trailer for this was supposed to, before it was like leaked, was supposed to be right after Agents of Shield. They wanted it to be kind of a tie-in that was kind of connecting those things. So it was.
He's going for your job.
I just wanted to. Kind of,
He's hungry. He's
That's
hungry
great.
for knowledge.
That's a great. While we're given facts about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I believe there was an episode where they explained that Coulson was the one who found the scepter and alerted Maria Hill, who told the Avengers. So there you go.
Oh,
man.
nice.
Anybody
And
else
it-
want to try to one-up each other with
I
Agents
don't
of
wanna- I
S.H.I.E.L.D.'s
don't wanna-
episodes?
I mean, I have a giant Agents of Shield tattoo. I think I win by default.
Probably.
Holy shit! Yes,
Oh, wow.
you definitely do. I won't take. I was just about to make fun of Agents of Shield, but now I will not.
I respect it. But if you haven't seen all 7 seasons, you also don't get an opinion.
And 100% I have not. But it's very funny to me that you guys are like, and this show I watched, it's very cool. It tells you how they got this car flying car that shows up at the end. And you're like, oh, you watched all that show and they introduced the car? Because I met the car too in this movie when it flies up. But you guys are big up in the car thing. And you're like, oh, you have a small exchange where this one guy claims to have found something that I also saw in this movie? Sure, that's very cool. There's a couple of things that also highlight. That up there, that's the end game. Look at this.
Yeah.
They already had it planned out. This
Yeah.
is the movie where they were like, let's actually make a plan.
Yeah, they were
going
not
forward.
flexing on us.
Yes.
Because I do think the fact that the stone turns emerges and is yellow from the scepter, I was like, bummer on that. That was one you might want to
That was a
head up
blue
little
scepter,
bit.
right?
Blue scepter.
Yeah, it was a blue
Yellow stone.
scepter, and then it's yellow inside. That continues years later to completely confuse me in terms of the stones whenever I think about it, because I'm like, that was the blue. No, the blue stone is the square one. The yellow stone is inside the scepter. But
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. That, and also you got the mid-credit scene, the very quick thing of Thanos grabbing the glove and saying, I'll do this myself. This does feel like, to your point, the movie where they're like, okay, let's get down to business and actually figure out what this story is.
Well, I'm sure they were sort of like, we're sick of figuring this out after we've made a very expensive movie and be like, oh, what do we need to fix to get this to be the Infinity Stones? And it's like, that's got to be stressful.
Well, but also they've had 2 phases at this point where they have been playing around and improvising, like we talked about a lot. Like that's one of the strengths of Kevin Feige and his team, is sort of figuring out things on the fly and tweaking things and being able to change things. But yes, this is the point when fans want to know what the story is and where it's going. So they got to figure it out. They have all the pieces in place. What were you going to say, Jamie?
I get so annoyed, like being like really into like Marvel Twitter and stuff, and I get some people like, Phase 4 sucks. We don't know where it's going. What are we doing? And it's like, yo, you guys are spoiled. Like you don't remember how long it took for certain things to come together. Like we were deep in when Ultron and we're getting to the stones finally. Like you guys, like just be patient. Enjoy each day as
kids.
it comes.
Damn
Yeah.
kids today. Damn
It is
kids
interesting,
today.
though, because I think even though they didn't know what was going on, it feels more deliberate than the Phase 4 where now I'm trying to see through the machinery here, and I'm like, what is the
Well, but
plan
that's
here?
part of that is because they've trained us to do that, like Jamie is saying. Like I don't think they were like, there's always a plan. I think they were pretty clear in Phase 1, at least. They're like, we hope this works. And then Phase 2 was like, well, that worked. Now let's try a couple of things. And then Phase 3 was like, okay, we're going to bring the plan together. Like that's clearly what it was, but they, even with that, and even with that level of improvisation that I think they've been very open and upfront about, fans, to the point that we're talking about, have been like, the plan was there all along. They knew what was going to happen. And you interview them anytime, they're like, no, we didn't. No, we were just kind of making it up and figuring it out.
But I would argue now they're like, we do have a plan that we are moving meticulously forward on. But now it feels even more opaque and confusing to me as someone who has a lot of passing knowledge with the things that they've put on the table here.
It might be, I mean, listen, we don't know until we see how it actually all pans out, but just to give a more positive spin on it, versus like slowly building up to this place with a plan with the first 3 phases like we're talking about, maybe the current phases are something where you look back and be like, oh, they actually did tie that all together because there actually was a plan there. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
So then,
but...
with that, if I'm going to jump onto your positive theory,
tell
me what the plan is right now.
No.
Tell me what you say the plan. Everybody.
I don't know. I don't know. That's my whole point, is that maybe we'll be able to retroactively look at it. We'll watch Avengers Secret Wars and be like, that was phenomenal. They brought everything together. That was amazing. They knew from the beginning. I love it. Or alternately, it might be the same sort of thing where they're like, we're throwing a bunch of stuff out there, trying a bunch of things here in phase 4.
I'm not saying you know the plan, but I'm saying, like, what are some elements of the plan? Because right now I'm at a loss of what even a beginning
Kang is an element of the plan.
Yeah, you only know that because of the movies they've announced, not because of the stories that you've been to.
Young Avengers seems inevitable.
Yeah.
That's fair, and I think that's spot on. But that doesn't seem like the main plan, even.
Maybe like the second tier plan.
Yes,
right.
But I agree.
Young Avengers is the most inevitable thing happening, and I'm very excited for that. But it feels like a weird side project. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Pete is raising his hand. What's up, Pete?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Age of Ultron. So some fun things that
the man of the people over here.
Some fun things that I also enjoyed about the movie. Like, we've seen it in other Avenger movies, but every time you have Dr. Banner and Tony together, kind of geeking out a little bit, the whole thing about like Jarvis and they first discover this kind of living Age of Ultron kind of thing. I there's something about them two in a lab together that is just so geek-tastic that I'm glad that we got it. Yeah, Science Bros, having some fun. It's just it's a lot of fun, really great. But also, like, knowing what I know now, at the time I didn't realize it, but like Captain America, like, giving Banner some like love advice because he didn't get his happy ending yet, was like at the time like so kind of like sad, but now it's different to kind of go back and it's like, oh, don't hang in there, bro, you're almost there, man. But like it's awesome because you know, as someone who is pro relationships and love, unlike Zelbin, to have these kind of like little things going on is just real nice.
Yeah. It's great. To think of him laying down with his true love in their casket.
Any other moments from the movie that you'd like to call out before we move on here? Any other things that jumped out to you?
The whole like kind of Thor drinking magical thing, and then Stan Lee kind of cameo, and it was just
Excelsior.
Yeah, it was just kind of dumb and fun, but also a hilarious setup that also was a funny kind of Thor moment, you know, that was led into Ragnarok.
What do we think about Vision just lifting up the hammer?
Oh, such a great way just to cut through the crap and to kind of be like, let's go. It's just such an amazing moment.
But why was he worthy? Is worthiness by your deeds, or is it established by your innocence? Because I get he's the most innocent. He was just born out of his casket. But like,
so are you suggesting that maybe a baby could lift?
Well, that's what I'm curious about. Is worthy? Do you earn worthiness, or do you have it, and then does everyone lose it?
Baby or
like a bit of both.
Yeah.
Baby or a frog is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Frog.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just real quick, how do you feel the essence of the human soul? Are people born pure, or are they born evil? What do you think, Justin?
That's not what
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I mean, I guess
We
that
know
does.
where Alex
You're not-
falls on this, but
Yeah.
do you agree or disagree?
I'm just saying this movie is telling us something, and I'm trying to figure out what it means. That Vision could pick it up like nothing.
But I think yes, to Pete's point, I think it is. He is worthy. He is a good being, synthezoid,
Good
whatever you want to call him. It also is just a nice runner through the movie, going from the party where they're trying to figure out who can lift it up and having that fun party game, to Vision just whips it out like it's nothing, to
Come
that
on, dude. You didn't have to say
discussion.
it like that. You didn't have to say it like that.
I kind of did, but at the end of the movie, to what a very fun discussion with Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man about whether an elevator, if it lifted up Mjolnir, would be worthy, which is great. Very fun stuff.
I'm saying I'm part of the Avengers because I'm having the same conversation,
Right.
and I know it's like it satisfies a
part of the
plot point, but
Avengers.
that doesn't satisfy me when I'm asking the
Wow.
question.
Well, what do you think? What makes you worthy?
Would think it has to be your deeds. So I don't know. That's why I don't. I always thought it was like you prove yourself worthy. You aren't worthy, and then it's a loss over time. So because that's what Thor's built on. He couldn't lift it when he was a kid. He had to prove himself and go out there and really earn the ability to lift the hammer. And Vision doing it right away does. I get that it was a fun way to end that story, but to me, it's like if I had to figure out what are we saying, the Mind Stone somehow had worthiness. Are we saying what? I don't know.
I don't think it's about deeds so much as like the hammer knows your maybe like your energy of goodness, and less of like a list of good things you've done. Like it just senses that Vision.
I thought it,
will do
That's
those
fair.
things.
Then what's changed between Captain America in this movie and Captain America in a couple movies later?
Because the hammer knows he needs it.
I'll also
Ah.
throw out there, this is probably on Pete's fact sheet, so don't want to eat his lunch here, like you like to say. But I believe they afterwards said
just
there's
pull
a
it up.
strong possibility that Steve was faking because he didn't want to make Thor feel bad. Like he could actually lift it up, but was kind of
Yeah.
playing with it a little bit.
It's funny you say that because I was thinking that, but I literally watched it and his muscles tense up a lot. Like he was doing something. It's not like
His
he was
muscles
just.
tense up when he's
Captain
walking
act.
upstairs.
You saw
or
his
just
like
sitting
old
there and being like,
TV bits they used to do. Captain act, bro. Come on. Classically trained actors got to.
he was
I
trained
don't
at the
think
USO.
he's not classically trained. Are you saying in the super soldier serum there's some sort of acting juice?
No, I'm saying
injected him
you,
with?
as a classically trained actor, should know acting when you see it because, like, he did those old timey shows back in the day. We had to tour around, do the whole.
I think
song
he
and dance.
famously didn't like doing those and was bad at them.
Well, yeah, but I also think that's part of the reason why he can lift it, and part of the thing for me is if you're pure of heart, like your intentions are pure. If you're somebody who is not open to evil and that kind of thing, is why you can lift the hammer. Not is what I assumed.
Okay.
Good stuff. Why don't we turn towards our vision board where we look at things going forward? This is a tricky one a little bit because, of course, we know there are several other Avengers movies that came out, but why don't we talk about Ultron? That's one of the dangling things that hasn't necessarily been followed up on. We know from the comics, Ultron comes back time and time again. Do you think there's a possibility that Ultron could come back at some point in the MCU? And if so, where would you want to see him? Jamie, any thoughts?
You know, I want it so bad. Like I give anything to have it, and but I'm not getting my hopes up. One, I think it was a bad sign that he didn't voice the character in What If. I
Right.
think that he's uninterested, and man, it was sucked not hearing his voice come out of Ultron. I was so mad about that. But if I feel like WandaVision would have been a really good. My boss Jim kept talking about how like he should have showed up as Vision's dad, like as James Spader, like in the
great.
sitcom, and like that would have been so good. And I feel like if we are ever going to see him again, it would have to be the Vision show. That's the Vision quest that we're getting, and I would kill for it. I would give anything for it, but I really don't think it's going to happen.
Justin?
I was going to say, I bet there's a chance we could see him in some sort of secret war situation. Like, he strikes me as a villain that we've established in What If is multiverse ready and would come back as a threat that very nearly got him. Like, I don't think we're gonna see, like, Loki's not gonna be a villain. Ultron felt the scariest of the villains. Even Thanos, even though he's sort of won, Ultron has always been a little bit more capable, I think.
I was going to say Secret Wars as well, and this is just my wish for years in the MCU that we get some sort of villain team up. I don't like killing villains. I think bring them back, have them do more stuff like we've had Loki do. Ultron, like I've already said a couple of times, I love. And having a multiverse mashup, whether it is the Ultron from What If or just an Ultron who shows up at some point for something along with a bunch of other villains, I think that would be super fun. And whatever direction they go in with Secret Wars, that feels like a good opportunity to do that sort of thing. And Pete, you would like to see Ultron come back in your dreams, I believe. Is that right?
No,
Just like haunting you in your nightmares.
Hopefully, we'll never see James Spader again.
James Spader
James
specifically.
Spader.
Fuck, man, no way.
God.
I did want to say though that I appreciate the fact that we stopped the movie for a couple of seconds just to be like, Wakanda. Yeah. Oh yeah, Wakanda exists. Okay, cool. Anyways.
Well, it was funny when Bruce got it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right, Jamie.
Real quick before on the Vision, we should talk about the Vision show that is coming our way, right?
Yeah, Jamie, you seem to know a bit about that. Do you want to talk about that at all?
I mean, the fact that it's Jack Schaefer, who was a big writer on WandaVision, is very promising. I like that. Like, WandaVision is getting its own spinoffs. Like, Coven of Chaos is the #1 project I'm excited about coming forward. Shocking again. I know
I might have predicted that. Yeah.
And so the fact that it's this team, I like the idea. Like with Wonder Man coming, I feel like we're maybe a little love triangle again. I'm a sucker for that stuff. So I think that I'm glad. I think Paul Bettany deserves more than just White Vision going off into the sunset in the end of WandaVision. So I'm excited, and I think that Jack Schaefer being involved is a really good sign.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to get Tom King's? Is that what the plan here is?
You know,
it's a little it's a little close to WandaVision. Exactly,
because like Sparky and all that. Like I really like that comic a lot. But I do think it's a little too close, and they pulled a lot of it already. I think it would be weird to see.
Yeah,
but it'd be cool. It's so dark. Like,
it'd be sad. It would be kind of sad.
The idea of him building an android Wanda interests me as like a version, sort of the other side of the coin. And don't get scared, Pete. This is a two-headed coin.
Oh man.
There's a way to make that work if it's very conscious of its nearness to it.
Well, I'll throw out something along those lines. There's literally no reason for them to follow up on this whatsoever, but there's a little Easter egg in the scene where Tony is booting up Friday, I believe, in his armor, where there's a disc that says Jocasta, which is Ultron's bride in the comic book. So if they really wanted to throw an Easter egg to the fans, that's the sort of thing that they could throw into a Vision Quest series, and it'll be fun. People are like, yeah,
the Jocasta fans.
They planned it all the time. I like Jocasta. I'm a fan.
I like Jocasta.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
I know. Well, you also like the helicarrier, so I don't know. You like everything. It's hard to rank.
It's all the only even, other thing, baby. All even.
The only other thing I would say is I haven't rewatched Infinity War or Endgame since I saw them in the movie theater. So I sort of think I haven't forgotten them, but I've forgotten maybe a lot of it. And this movie, watching this, made me very excited to rewatch those in the future.
Well, we'll definitely be getting to those sooner rather than later. Before we let you go, though, Jamie, what would you like to plug? Where should people check you out again?
Oh, boy, well, write stuff for comicbook.com, but I have my own Marvel podcast, Phase Zero, with Comic Book, and it's cool. We get some cool people. We just got Jessica Gao, the showrunner of She-Hulk,
awesome.
Michael Giacchino was on, talking about Werewolf by Night. So we get some cool people. Wow. So definitely check that out. And follow me on Letterboxd because I think Twitter's dying, and I'm obsessed with Letterboxd. So I'm Jamie Cinematics on there.
Awesome. Jamie, thank you again so much for coming on. And for all of you out there, if you'd like to support our podcast and all the podcasts we do, patreon.com/comic book club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast and YouTube coming out. We'd love to chat with you about the MCU. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show. At Marvel Vision Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, stay marvelous.
I've got no strings. Alex, take it over really quickly.
That's me.